Hello and everyone. This is our Industry 4.0 Club on LinkedIn Live here. This is our Thursday weekly event on people, process, and culture. Thanks everyone for joining our conversation today. We are going to continue our series on autism and manufacturing. This is our third episode of this series that is led by Jason here from our club. And today we are joined with Ivan Rosenberg on a uniquely abled topic. And I am very interested in that. I think it's a nice way to change the whole game from disabled to actually we're all special in some way or another, and people are uniquely able to do other things. So I'm really interested in that conversation and looking forward to also both your comments on the chat and as well as, of course, the conversation with Ivan. So we'll start with talking a little bit with Ivan. We're going to start with an introduction from each one of us here, and then we will be continuing into this conversation. Jason has prepared some questions, and I'm sure Ivan has prepared some ideas of what you want to talk about based on what his initiative is. So I'm really looking forward to this. If you like to have these type of conversations as much as we do, please join our scheduled events. We have them every day, Monday through Thursday, from 12:30 p.m. Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Central, with various topics around Industry 4.0. We are right now doing every other week, so Monday, Wednesday, one week, and then Tuesday, Thursday, the opposing week. So you can check our schedule on Industry 4.0 Club uh, .com, as well as on LinkedIn, of course. So thanks everyone for being here. We love have you guys come back and join our conversations, and hope and encourage you guys to continue to join us in these rooms in the future with Industry 4.0 Club topics. Just a quick introduction on myself. When I'm out here with these great people, my name is Jan Pinkel. I am product leader for digital solutions for Ingersoll Rand, where we are utilizing IoT to make our equipment smart and connected. On to you, Jason.
Hey, I'm Jason Bean, and when I'm not doing the Industry 4 Club, my day job is the IoT market specialist for Pepperl and Fuchs. Um, I also was diagnosed with autism at the age of 37 and decided I wanted to tackle a series on autism in manufacturing because I was attending trade shows. Everybody was talking about diversity and inclusion, but nobody was talking about people with disabilities, and in particular, people with autism. Uh, Currently, the latest CDC numbers state that there's about 5.5 million adults in the US with autism. Labor force participation rates for people with autism is about 34%. Any people with a disability, their labor force participation rates are around 54, and just your neurotypical or your normal individual, their labor participation rate is about 83. So just in those numbers alone, we can see that people on the autism spectrum really aren't participating within the labor market. And you've got roughly, an estimated 2.3 million unfulfilled manufacturing jobs by 2030 within the US. So if you're looking at about 5.5 million adults with autism. Uh, the severely underemployed to unemployed rates within autism are estimated at about 80 to 85%. So we're looking at a total available market of about 4.3 million individuals that want to work, are capable of working, but aren't being tapped by manufacturers. Uh, so I found out about the Uniquely Able project through online doing some research and reached out to Ivan and thought I'd invite him onto the show to explain um, what the Uniquely Able project is, how they're um, working with people on the autism spectrum to fulfill some of these manufacturing roles that are going to be unfulfilled. So Ivan, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself, who you are, and why you wanted to get involved in this.
Great. Thanks, Jason. And thanks for the introduction. It's actually perfect. Um, I founded the Uniquely Able Project in about 2016. And the question is always, how did it come about and why? And I think it's because there was a confluence of three things in my background. One of them, I'm the parent of two children on the spectrum. And when they were in their teens, I was thinking, how are they going to support themselves when we're not here anymore? Which is a typical question of parents with kids with some kind of a challenge. And as Jason summarized, the statistics are terrible. So I wasn't very positively inclined with their future. But the other things that were unique, secondly, I'm a management consultant. And so I'm a business person. And uniquely business people taking on this social challenge of unemployment, I think is unusual. And so I approached it from a business point of view. And the other thing is that a lot of my clients are aerospace and defense manufacturers. In fact, I created a professional association called the Aerospace and Defense Forum. So I was very familiar with what's going on in the manufacturing world. And lastly, my educational background is as an engineer. So I was not intimidated when looking at engineering things. So those three things came together. And my first question was, okay, how are we going to solve this unemployment problem that Jason nicely summarized? And it wasn't just autism, but if you look at the entire world of disabled, which at the time is about 60 million people classified as disabled, and a 60 to 90% unemployment rate. That's a big problem. And on the other side, because I'm a management consultant, I realized the other aspect, which Jason nicely summarized. The number one problem of most businesses is access to a skilled workforce. And there's just millions of unfilled jobs, and companies are dying for them. So I said, wait a minute. These look to me like solutions to each other, right? We got millions of people on this side that want to work and are capable of working. And we have millions of job openings on this side that need to be filled. What's in the way? And I approached it just like a consultant. So the first thing that I saw that was in the way is the word disabled. So if I go to an employment manager and I say, would you like to hire Jay? And he's disabled. What thoughts occur to the employment manager? First thought is, well, what is he not able to do? What's his disability? And we're almost always immediately in a charity conversation. That's not a good way to sell a product, by saying, here's what it doesn't do, unless what it doesn't do is bad. So I said, we got to get rid of this word disabled, at least in the employment world. The thing I saw was that everybody that has a diagnosis, or I would say actually everybody that has an employment challenge, has a compensating unique ability. The obvious one, for example, are people that have visual challenges and they have heightened senses of touch and hearing, better than people who can see well. What nobody does is says, what jobs could use those heightened skills? For example, in being a masseuse. Now, I'm not saying everybody who has a visual challenge should be a masseuse, but you can see that vision actually is not useful if you're a masseuse. Touch and hearing is. So I coined the term uniquely abled, and then I can go to employment manager and say, I'd like you to consider hiring Jay, and he's uniquely able to fit the vacancy you have. There's now a whole different set of thoughts occur in that employment manager's mind. So that's where the term came from, and that's where the Uniquely Able Project came from, with two purposes. One is to shift our thinking from disabled to uniquely able to see what's possible. And the other was to facilitate career employment for uniquely abled individuals by matching their unique abilities to career jobs in demand. The first match that we saw was level 1 autism, which has also been called high functioning autism, now called level 1, to operating a CNC, or computer numerically controlled manufacturing machine. And it turns out that is an almost perfect match. Now, I'm not saying everybody with autism is going to be a CNC machinist, but there statistically is a perfect match. And so what we did is set up training academies called Uniquely Abled Academies across the country. There are 8 of them that have opened so far. Over 100 kids have graduated to date with an almost 100% job placement at salaries $19 an hour with full benefits is not unusual. And the Uniquely Able Academy is a 1-semester program, and it's free. And so one of the questions I had was, how come there aren't more successful vocational training programs out there? Because I was on the board of one, and we thought 30% job placement was great. I didn't think it was so hot. And what I saw was there are actually 10 elements that are required for a successful vocational education program for the uniquely abled, none of which are rocket science. I can go to any place in the country and you can say, is there, what organization provides that element? And I can find one. The problem is that no one organization provides all 10 elements, and there was not a structure for collaboration. And that's all the Uniquely Abled Academy is a structure for collaboration where multiple organizations can partner to provide a seamless program from the time that an individual sees an open house for Uniquely Abled Academy all the way through to when the job coach says, yeah, you really don't need me anymore. One program, free, seamless to the whole place. So that's it in a nutshell. And suspect you have maybe 1 or 2 questions. Jason, your audio.
Yeah, Jason, you on.
Sorry. So being on the spectrum myself, I kind of know what those unique skill sets are that do tend to pair well with a CNC operator. For those in the audience that may not know what they are, what are those unique skill sets that people on the spectrum do bring to an employer?
And it's interesting because obviously we've had lots of employers now, and far from, oh my God, what accommodations and compromises am I going to have to make, which is usually the first thought people have, to these people are my best employees. And why are they the best? Well, one, they do what they say they're going to do. People with autism want to know what the rules are, and they follow the rules rigorously. That's very, very unusual in the employment world. They're very focused. So if you're running a CNC machine, you really want to have all your attention. And it's not unusual to be running 3 machines at the same time. So they're focused. They're very sensitive to when things are not working. You're talking about a multi-million-dollar machine and parts that themselves may be worth tens of thousands of dollars, the piece of metal. So you want to be very sensitive to, are things working or not? And when things are not working, stop it immediately and find out what's going on instead of going on. And that is a characteristic of people with autism. They tend to be very focused on the job. They don't like being distracted. They like getting the job done. And I don't know exactly how to say this, but they think logically, they think process, which is how a CNC machine works because it's computer controlled. So the thinking of the machine and the thinking of somebody typical with autism is the same. For example, that's how I think. I'm an engineer by background. My wife is, she's a relationships person, a social. She doesn't think like I do at all. And she'd have a hard time with a CNC machine because of the process involved. I have no problem with it. I should also say that this is just our first start. There's other jobs in a manufacturing environment that don't involve prior training. And we are also got resources available to facilitate that. And I can speak more about that if you're interested. But that's one of the things that we saw, that this great match between level 1 autism and CNC operating. And as you can see, it's turned out.
Okay, so what, other than just CNC, do you actually help people with autism into other manufacturing jobs, and how do you approach that subject with the employers?
Two big questions. First of all, what other jobs? Well, we're currently looking in two ways, well, a couple of different ways. One is we're looking at what other diagnoses might be a good fit for a CNC operator. We have to have a grant application in to study that. And the other thing we're looking at is what other vocations are a good fit for people with, at least at the moment, level 1 autism. And what we've seen are certain IT jobs, such as a website management, programming robotic, manufacturing robots, but almost anything in the IT area tends to be a good fit. So we're looking at establishing uniquely able academies in that area. In terms of other jobs, which don't require prior training, such as deburring, finishing things off, assembly, moving things in and out of inventory, things like that. And some of your simple manufacturing machines, like a 10-ton press operator, usually just puts a part in the machine and then hits two switches, and the machine presses, and they take the part off, and they do it over and over and over again. You don't need prior training for that. The companies expect to do that themselves. The problem there is that the companies don't distinguish between skills and ability. So a skill might be, for example, if I take this pen, a skill might be I can take that cover off and put it on the bottom. I can do that. That's a skill. To do that 3 or 4 times a minute for 8 hours for 7 days or 5 to 7 days a week, that's an ability. I need to tolerate high repetition and yet maintain detail focus. That's an ability. And companies don't distinguish between those two. They think mainly in terms of skills. And yet what determines success in a job is often, in particularly manufacturing, is ability. So for example, I consulted with the fastener manufacturers, and that ability to tolerate high repetition and yet maintain detail focus is a requirement. You know, you lose attention, you lose a finger because you're dealing with dangerous machines. Well, nowhere in their job descriptions or their job applications, you know, the advertising, do they mention, hey, we'd like you to tolerate high repetition and yet maintain detail focus. So the things that people could do particularly well aren't even looked for. So the first thing we're doing is trying to educate companies what abilities are needed for success in these jobs. They're often highly repetitive. Secondly, companies don't realize that there's populations which love those jobs. I mean, because we think, well, we wouldn't like a high repetition job, so nobody must. And yet we know there are populations, including those with autism, from whom high repetition is actually desirable. And even if companies realize that, they wouldn't know, well, where do I go to get those people? And so what we've done is on the website, we've done 2 things. One, we've got a directory of manufacturing jobs with the abilities and the skills needed for those. And that often also provides a common language between the manufacturers and the job developers who generally don't know anything about manufacturing. They're social work backgrounds. So if you said a 10-ton press operator machine, they would know what you're talking about, or a CNC machine. So you have to educate the job developers. And the next thing we also put on the website is a directory of organizations that a manufacturer can call to get people to work for their company. And it's by geography. Now, it's not as extensive we like, but we open to suggestions and we'll add them to the directory as we get them. It's very good for Southern California and somewhat good for the rest of the country. And hopefully that answers your question.
How is the autism community receiving the program?
Overwhelming support. In fact, what we've had to watch for is parents like me, who have kids on the spectrum, essentially forcing their kids into the program because there's just no alternatives out there. I mean, these kids end up packing groceries at a grocery store, and they may have 140 IQ and be capable of great stuff, but they're doing a job that's terrible. So the parents hear of this training program, and they force their kids into it, if you will. So we've got ways of discouraging that and preventing that. But it's been tremendous support from the autism community because we're answering a huge need on the part of parents. Parents with kids with autism, they worry every single night. How is my kid going to support himself? Is he going to end up at a group home? Is he going to be living on welfare? Is he going to be living on the streets? And look, I've been there. So I know that's what parents are worried about. And when they hear about something like the Uniquely Able Academy, they just overwhelming support.
I mean, it's great to hear all this stuff that's going on in this space, although they are, small initiatives here and there. And so, especially your program, you said you got 8 different locations. Are they mostly on the West Coast, or where are they kind of from a country?
All over the country.
Oh, that's nice.
So we've got 4 in California because that's where we started. Milwaukee, Lima, Ohio, Needsville, Pennsylvania, Erie, Pennsylvania. I can't remember the Lakota, something like that in Minnesota. Here's the reason why. I wanted to hit that 60 million. I wasn't satisfied with just doing something small. And so whatever we did, it had to be easily scalable. So we don't control the Uniquely Able Academies. We don't fund them. We don't manage them. We're like Johnny Appleseed. Our job is to come in and get them started. And we build them around existing CNC training programs at community colleges or equivalent. And then we help them. We got all kinds of documentation and videos. We've got the job readiness programs and all kinds of support for them to put together a Uniquely Able Academy. I should also say, you asked for the support of parents, the autism community. Remember I mentioned that this program is free. Not one of those 100+ kids had paid a dime. And so the question is, where's that money come from? Because the community college wants its tuition, and the nonprofits that are involved, they want their money, which is right. Well, most of the money comes from the state vocational rehab organizations, whatever they may be called. And they pay it with a smile. And here's why. When you look at the community college tuition for one semester, and they take about 4 or 5 courses in one semester, your cost is maybe $3,000 to $5,000 a student, maybe somewhere in that vicinity. For most voc rehabs, that's in the noise level. And when I can tell the voc rehab people that in 16 weeks, for $3,000 to $5,000, you can close the case on this individual, they are delighted, because that's their job, is to get jobs for these people. And they're frustrated because there's so few successful training programs for career jobs. That's why these kids end up in retail stores. because there's just no training programs, and they have to put them in places, in jobs for which training is not needed, which is mainly retail. So the government are just delighted. In California, Department of Rehab has been one of our biggest supporters and is delighted. The more uniquely able academies we create, the happier they are. And it's been the same in every state we've gone to.
No, that's great. So we've had two episodes ahead of this. You're on a third episode here, and very interesting stuff. On the two initial episode we had, one topic was like the recruitment, onboarding, interviewing, etc. And so I'm sure that that's definitely also something that you got to think about. Not just that these individuals are uniquely able to get into the job, but they also got to get through an interview process, etc. So is there part of that in the training, both for the
Absolutely.
interviewer, but also for the manufacturers that you're onboarding?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Both. So we've developed, with a great support from Mitsubishi America Electric Foundation, we've developed a bunch of resources to help the instructors know how to teach this population, managers or potential employers on the advantages, potential managers on how to manage, and there's a 10-lesson, 40-hour job readiness program for the participants. One of those topics in that job readiness program is interviews, and how do you conduct yourself in an interview, and how do you select, and all that stuff. And then we also, in one of those elements, is coaching employers how to select, because the way they select doesn't work. The typical selection is put people in front of an interviewer and ask them tough questions. So if you ask somebody with autism, tell me about the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to you, well, they'll tell you because you asked them, and they take it literally. And so they fail the interview, or they don't look you in the eye, which can be very challenging for some people with autism. And the interviewer, if they don't know anything about autism, will assume the person's lying and will fail them. So we tell the potential employers, don't bother to interview. I mean, not the way you're thinking of it. Rather, in fact, make clear what you're looking for, because often what an interviewer is looking for isn't the same as what's needed for success in the job. I don't care whether somebody can look somebody in the eye when they're running a CNC machine. It's important that they tell the truth. So we coach employers on how to select. We encourage uniquely able academies to get employers involved early. So they're on the advisory committees. We invite them to come and visit classes, and do a lot of plant visits. But I'll tell you what happened in College of the Canyons in Santa Clarita, California, was our second uniquely able academy. And the head of that academy had been running what's called a fast track program. So he was used to doing things in 16 weeks. And what he typically did for the job was have a job fair, and he'd invite, say, if he had 10 kids in the class, he'd invite 10 employers for the morning and 10 in the afternoon, and they'd each be in another room, and they'd do 15-minute interviews. And then they'd have graduation that night. And we told him that every kid was going to fail, because if you think about somebody with autism, 10 15-minute interviews in the morning and 10 in the afternoon, that sounds like hell. It really does sound terrible. And he said, no, I think if you prepare these kids, I think they can be very successful. So part of the job readiness training was exactly that. They had teaching them what kind of questions are you going to have? How do you answer them? What kind of things do you say? How do you dress? And they actually had an evening where they had 3 pretend employers there. I think they were real employers, I think, came in, and they had an experience of what those were like. Well, they've done it twice now. It's been outrageously successful in both cases. And if you look at the film that was made of the College of the Canyons, it's part of that. One of them is about the interviews. And one of the kids said, I was nervous, but I was very well prepared. All 20 to date have jobs. In fact, in the second cohort, one kid got a job offer during the interview because the employer had heard how successful these kids were and didn't want to take a chance on them going somewhere else. One employer offered all 10 people from the last cohort a job. And so the word's out that, hey, these are your best employees, and they deal with the shortage you have. So one of the questions that the head of that academy got asked is, how long does it take before these kids actually have a job? After the graduation. And he said, oh, a month to 2 months, maybe 2.5 months. And he said, oh, it takes them that long to get a job offer? He said, no. They get 3 to 4 job offers within a few days. It takes them that long to decide which one they're going to accept.
Well, that is so cool. Thanks for that response. Just a quick reset here. If you're joining a little bit late into the event here today, we are today here Industry 4.0 Club on our Thursday event on people, process, and culture, and we're joined here today by Ivan Rosenberg in our series on autism manufacturing, talking about uniquely abled future employees, potential employees, in a very interesting project that he's leading here, and he's been talking about that for a little bit. We also joined on LinkedIn by Carol from our Industry 4.0 Club, and Carol has a question. I'm going to post it here quick. Where and how have you made improvements to the program over the years?
Good question. Well, let's see. First of all, we've learned a lot on how to have the multiple organizations partner and what that process should be like. We realized that one of the problems was the job developers, the people whose responsible was to find jobs for these folks who are often working either for the government, voc rehab, or working for a nonprofit. As I said, have a social work background and didn't understand manufacturing. If I used the term B2B, they wouldn't know what I was talking about. And that's a real problem. So what we had to do was educate job developers in a uniquely abled perspective, what B2B means, where the career jobs are, which is generally in B2B. How do you find out where the vacancies are? How do you get a meeting with an employment manager? And how do you sell? Because these people, the job developers, they give their life to help somebody find a job. So they're really great people. As I say, they're not in it for the stock options, but they don't consider themselves salespeople. They consider themselves like a fundraiser. It's a charity conversation. So we had to teach them how to sell. So we created a job developer workshop. I used to do it live, trained over 150 people. And then the pandemic hit. I said, okay, let's create videos. So there are 7 one-hour videos on our website. They're available for free. All you have to do is look at their job developer on the workshop, job developer tab on the website, and it'll take you to the 7 one-hour videos and watch them at your leisure. So we've done that. I had written a very extensive manual that ended up being 135 pages on how do you set up a uniquely able academy, and realized that that wasn't a good way to try and educate people. To hand them a 135-page manual, someone wouldn't even start reading it. So what we're doing now is we're breaking that up into smaller bits that are very specialized. And as we get a piece specialized, we can improve it. So how do you market a uniquely able academy? Much more information about getting parents involved, which we didn't think about much at the beginning. So there's been a lot of little incremental improvements as we move forward. We expect a lot more. And of course, the Mitsubishi grant gave us the ability to create resources that have been a major improvement. And the other thing that Mitsubishi grant enabled us to do was we have 2 now uniquely abled academy consultants So I used to do it all. Somebody wanted to start, I'd sell it and walk them through the whole thing. Well, it's getting too big to do that. So there were two people. Mike Bastine had started the UE Cable Academy at College of the Canyons. John Wheeler had started the one at Rhodes State College in Lima, Ohio. And they both retired last year after successfully starting them. And so we hired them. And so what we have now is Mike is responsible for all Unique Cable Academies west of the Mississippi, John for all those east. And so now when a community college says, yeah, we're ready to go, we want to do this, we assign them one of those two individuals and they walk them through the process. And they're there for them on call, on schedule until they're not needed anymore. And sometimes that's forever. So for example, Milwaukee, we met with them every week for an hour, and they're very successful now, but they still stay in touch with John every other week. They have a phone call just to ask questions. So those are the kind of ways the program is improved. And we're not stopping there. We're going to, as I say, move on to other diagnoses and other jobs.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, like other diagnoses. What other areas are you thinking that? So I mentioned before the first episode was on really hiring and kind of enabling the hiring managers to work this process well. And the second was on technology, right? And so when we're talking about, we said level 1 autism, there's not a lot of technology needs here. It's about communication a lot of times, right? It's about making sure that you understand how they take a lot of things more literally than you would, and just got to work that out. But there are other disabilities that still might be hidden where technology can help as well. Is that something you guys are thinking about as well?
Yeah, we're well, first of all, one logical place to go is other levels of autism. And we're not quite sure. Look, I picked the low-hanging fruit. And also because both my kids are level 1 on the level 1 autism, so I knew it well. I don't know where else on the autism spectrum we might be able to go and still do CNC operator. Just don't know yet. Or what other jobs might be really a good fit. I've already mentioned IT and so on, but what other jobs might be fit for other people on the spectrum? For other diagnoses, as I mentioned, this jobs that don't require prior training, like deburring and things like that. One of our first pilots was placing people in those kinds of jobs. And I remember, and again, this is not my specialty, but there was an individual with Down syndrome. These are people that were more severely, I'm trying to figure out a different word, more severely affected by their diagnosis. And they did spectacularly well. The company started off with 3, ended up hiring 13. They had much more repetition. Well, I'll give you an example. They were a refurbishment shop for large aircraft landing gear. And they would do 300 or 400 landing gears a year. Bring them in, take them completely apart, and then replace or refurbish the parts and put them all back together again. And parts that clearly could not be refurbished, they would put the customer's name on it because the customer owned that piece of metal, and they throw it in the stock room. Well, every once in a while, the customer would like to come back and say, they come to visit, but they also wanted to see, well, how much of this metal do I have that I can sell, right? Well, when that happened, they'd have to pull somebody off the production line and send them into the stockroom to get things organized. And what that did, first of all, that person was pretty highly paid, and secondly, it negatively impacted the production. These people that I mentioned, and I can't remember if the one with Down syndrome or not. And you say, would you go in and straighten up the stockroom? Oh boy, goody! And it was a win. The other thing that I haven't mentioned, and this is really well documented now, is when you include uniquely abled individuals into your normal population, the productivity and the morale of the entire place goes up. And there's lots of research data on that now. And you don't have to do anything. You just hire them and treat them right. And one of my good friends is CEO of a company. I think it's got about 200 or 300 people in it. And we were having lunch, and I said, and these were people not that were doing this kind of highly repetitive or jobs for which you didn't need training. And so we're having lunch, and I said, so how's it going? He hired 3. He said, it was the best business decision I ever made. I said, how come? He said, I hired 3 people at essentially minimum wage, and the productivity and the morale of my entire company went up. Not bad. And we thought, well, how did that happen? Well, a couple of things. First of all, it's a pretty good assumption that every single individual has no more than 1 or 2 degrees of separation from somebody with a diagnosis. And a large portion of those are with autism. So they know people. In fact, often the head of a company either has a child with autism or knows somebody who does. So there's I'm glad maybe it's not with the person I know, but I'm glad our company is doing something that's helping this community. Secondly, they're doing a job that nobody else wants to do. And they do it great, and they do it with a smile. And doing it with a smile, it's really hard to complain when the person next to you has clearly a significant diagnosis and is smiling and coming to work. And he said the last thing was, for some reason, the people we hired, they're impeccable. They can't stand the mess. And they'll walk down the hall and they'll see a piece of paper on the floor and everybody else will ignore it, but not them. They'll pick it up and throw it away. And they'll see a picture that'll be tilted and they'll go and they'll straighten it up. And he said, it's really hard to do messy work in an impeccable environment.
That's a cool insight, and it does resonate with what we've heard earlier as well. Is that especially the company culture changes when you do this,
Yep.
because you're kind of communicating a different level of empathy a lot of times, and that drives other aspects of the culture for sure. So I mean, it's great to hear that you can kind of say, yeah, it is proven, and especially when you have a business owner that says, hey, that's the best decision I ever made, not just because I hired these 2 people, but from everything else that happened. That's
It's got to be a business conversation.
Yeah.
It's got to be business. It can't be charity. Charity is not sustainable.
Right.
It comes and goes.
Yeah.
It's all, and that's what Unique Able Project's built on. It's built on nobody suffering, everybody winning, as you can hear. That's what happens. And I think that the people, the workforce in a company, when they see the company doing something really great, like making a difference, it gives you some pride and it changes the morale. And there's lots and lots of stories that I have about how the morale impacted the productivity of the organization. In fact, Walgreens has a book. There's a book. The guy was the guy that was in charge of the warehouses, the distribution houses, and I've met him. I can't remember his name, but he set up, I think, what was at the time the 7th or 8th warehouse for distribution house for Walgreens. And he decided that 40% of the people they hired would have a diagnosis, and they'd hire everybody, independent. Well, that particular distribution house turned out to be the highest production distribution house in the entire Walgreens chain. And the next one they built, they went for 50%, because it turns out that it's a good business decision if you manage it correctly. Your audio's off, Jen.
Yeah, I think I found the book, No Greatness Without Goodness. how a father's love changed the company and sparked a movement. Is this one of the executives of Walgreens?
Yep,
Randy Lewis, right?
that's it. That's the guy's name. Yep. Yeah, and there's a company in Tennessee, I think it makes carpets, and it's written a book called Abled, ? And they hire people independent of their diagnosis. So with the Unique Able Academy, we're looking at level 1 autism. They take on anybody. And they are also one of the highest performing companies around.
Very cool.
Yeah, I just thought, I think somehow Jason got locked out.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to add him back in.
There
There
he
you go.
is.
There you go. I'm
Sorry,
back.
I don't know if that was me, but I saw you had unmuted, so definitely want to give you an opportunity to comment as well.
Yeah, I was actually gonna bring up the Walgreens because you can actually find a YouTube video with him where he talks about his reasons as to why he was going to hire a workforce that nobody else would hire.
Yep.
Right. But how much education do you find you have to do on the employer side? Because in my experience, so many employers aren't even willing to talk about it because they don't understand it or the misconception of what autism is.
Yep. So it involves an education. So for example, we have a video on the homepage of our website called The Future of CNC. And the 3 actors in it are all UAA graduates. So and they're all different, so you can see what autism looks like. And they're all employed. They all run CNC machines. In fact, the one at the very beginning, one of them introduces the video, and he says, he does it better than I can do. He said, so this is a CNC machine, it makes parts, and you need to have an operator run it. And one of the problems out there is there's not, there's an insufficiency or a need for people to run CNC machine. And he looks at the camera and says, I'm the ideal employee you've been searching for. And the rest of the video is all on getting employers to realize, and this is by the graduates themselves, why it's a good thing. So that's a great introduction to it. The second best marketing has been other employers who've successfully hired. That's what's happened in College of the Canyons, for example. These kids, we have employers call the school before graduation and ask for, because they want to get in there before anybody else. That these kids are in demand. And it's because they've heard from other employers how successful these employees are, filling a critical need. And so that helps a lot. And the third thing is we don't have to force it on anybody. There's a huge demand out there. Companies are dying for CNC operators. And I remember when we first started, before we had any data, and I was talking to a CEO, and we had a long conversation, and he said, well, this all sounds really great, but I'd really like somebody with 2 years experience. And I said, fine, I'd like a Jaguar too. And we both got as much chance of that. And because I knew, and I was being a wise guy, but I knew behind him were 10 more people that are lined up ready to hire this person. So we don't have to force them down anybody's throat. And once the word gets out in an area, as I say, the first one's always the tough one. Although we now have enough employers out there that we can send a potential employer to speak to one of their peers and tell them they'll tell them how great it is. And on the videos as well, you can hear from employers. So that helps a lot. As I say, we could have demand. We could have a UAA at every single community college, and we still wouldn't fulfill the demand.
So for employers or individuals that want to get involved with this, what's the best way for them to actually get on board and help promote this?
Yeah, I think we get that question a lot, and so I'm used to it. In fact, 2 of the uniquely abled academies were started with a phone call from a parent. And I remember one mother in Plymouth, Massachusetts, called me and said, "Your program sounds absolutely ideal for my son, who's 23 years old. We're not moving to California. What do I do?" And I got the same kind of call from a mother in Milwaukee, which ended up in that one, Unique Academies there. So if somebody wants to get involved, I mean, one thing is they can certainly go on our website and just look at the videos so they can get somewhat familiar with what we're talking about. And then if they want to do something, they can certainly get in touch with me. You know, there's a contact thing on the website. But if they want to get a running start, then there's three things that are really a precursor, which is why I tell people. One, you got to make sure there are jobs in the area, CNC jobs. That's real easy. You just go on the website in Indeed or anything and just say, you know, job openings in whatever city you're in for CNC operators. And if you get 2 or 3 pages, you know there's lots of jobs. And the other thing you want to know is there a training program in your vicinity? So you want to look at the community college in your vicinity and ask, do they have a CNC or an advanced manufacturing? Those are the keywords, training. And then the third thing is there a sufficient supply of people with level 1 autism? And if you're in any kind of an rural, urban area, it's almost guaranteed. But you can talk to your local autism society or whatever your local vocational rehab, your state agency is called, and just ask them, you know, how many people with level 1 autism do you think are in our area, or how many people with autism are in our area? And that's it. And if those things come back positive, certainly the next thing is to call me, get in touch with me, and then we'll decide which is the best course from there. But probably hook you up with one of our UAA consultants and walk you through the process. And as I say, that's how they've gotten started so far. There's always somebody that's got an interest calling me, sending an email on the website, something like that. And that's all we need to get things going.
Yeah. So if you look at the latest CDC numbers, it's 1 in 44 people is expected to have autism.
Yeah,
And it doesn't matter what country you're in. Those numbers are pretty much within that range in every country in the world. So the workforce is there pretty much in almost every community.
Yep.
You know, thinking to myself, you know, a good area where I would see for getting a uniquely abled would be in Detroit or Windsor, Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
Just the number of tool and die shops that is in that area, that is the highest concentration of tool and die shops in North America, that
Wow.
Windsor and Detroit area. So just thinking to myself is like, you know, the need for the workers in that area has to be quite significant.
Yeah,
And
we just need somebody who lives in an area that's interested. As I say, it could be somebody that doesn't know how to spell CNC. You know, we don't care. We'll take care. We'll help if they're interested in getting that something going in their area. We'll help them.
And what about getting it going in, say, like another country, say Canada or over in Europe? Like, are you guys willing to work with people in other countries to get these up and going?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we've had inquiries from Canada and Japan, to which we responded positively. They just didn't take it to the next step, and we were so busy just handling the people that were working, which is basically what we do. We're a small, small organization, mostly all volunteers, and so we go where the demand is. And so people, all has to do is somebody contact me, as I say, or just there's a contact on the bottom of our website, and just say, here's where I am, here's what I'd like to do, help. That's all we need. Don't need to know anything more than that.
Yeah, when I was listening to where you had the other 4 non West Coast, it sounded like you got at least some on the Northeast and on the East Coast.
Oh yeah.
But there's definitely, I mean, I'm about 2 hours away from Greenville, South Carolina, and in Atlanta, there's a lot of opportunities there as well, I'm sure. So yeah.
We think there's opportunities all over the place. It's just a matter of having somebody local,
Yeah,
to say,
exactly.
hey, I'd like to get this. Right now, we've got a commitment from, in addition to the ones we've already opened, we've got a commitment from Hudson Valley in Troy, New York. We've got people working on Massachusetts, one in Connecticut, um, Dallas, Texas. Those are off the top of my head. So we'll we're set up to support anybody anywhere in the country that is interested in having a uniquely able. And you asked me about what should employers do. Work to get a uniquely able academy in your area that'll supply you with employees. That's and again, all you have to do is call me, and we'll help you identify. Although most employers know what the training facilities are for like CNC in their area. They already know that. But if there's something else, if they're in IT or in some other kind of thing, we'll work with them and say, okay, we'll help you get a UAA set up in that area. That's how we get them going. Even though we don't yet, even though we haven't done vocation X with diagnosis Y, if somebody's interested in it and sees there's a good match, great, we'll work with them. And my vision is that someday across the country, there'll be UAAs in a variety of different disciplines and vocations. And employers will know that if you want to get a great employee for Vocation X, you call your local uniquely abled academy.
And I think that's the call to action here. Anybody listening here, there is tons of opportunity, and I have shared a couple of links on the LinkedIn Live here, and also on the messaging on LinkedIn Live. So please reach out if you think that there's an opportunity in your area, and if there's a community college with manufacturing kind of training. It doesn't have to be CNC, but definitely manufacturing is a good place to start.
Yep.
Also, as you say, IT and other areas, I think that's great opportunities for that. And hey, there's help out there, and there is lots of stuff to do. So that's great to hear.
One of the questions people ask, I mentioned already, how does it get funded? Another question people ask is, how do you get a community college interested?
Yeah.
So one of the trends going on today is that all post high school graduate educational institutions, many are having a really hard time filling their classrooms because people are graduating from high school and say, well, why go and pay for that education? I can get a good job and have a career and start earning money without having a student debt or taking another 2 to 4 years and all that. So many community colleges are having a tough time filling their classrooms. The other thing is that they're getting increasing pressure from the states who are funding the community colleges to make sure their programs lead to a vocation. And the third thing is that the states are also emphasizing services to challenged underserved workforces, such as those with autism, veterans, et cetera, et cetera. So if you look at a uniquely able academy, it checks all the boxes. And so the community colleges have been able to go to the community, to the government, to everybody, and say, see the great thing we're doing. In Ohio, the lieutenant governor came down and visited the Uniquely Able Academy in Lima, Ohio, and said, we got to have one of these in every single community. And the radio station was there, and the TV station was there, and the newspaper was there. Wonderful publicity for the community college. So there's something in it for everybody.
Absolutely. So we're at time here. This has been such a great conversation, and I always really get excited when I hear things that are going on, and especially things that has such great potential as what you're doing, and it has a applicability basically everywhere. It's just a matter of making the right connections, right? I mean,
Yep.
just connecting the right organization together, and we can make it happen. So I have enjoyed the conversation. Any last thoughts from you, Ivan, before we close down?
Oh, thank you. I mean, the thank you. The big thing is letting people know that the Uniquely Able Academy exists, and the possibility of shifting your thinking from, oh, they're disabled and I need to help them and take care of them, to they're uniquely able. They got something real special.
Yeah.
And that includes the parents, by the way, because I'm a parent and I had to do that shift myself. And having employers shift from, oh my God, there's millions of potential workers out there that I didn't even know about. So it's all a matter of shifting here first. So thank you for the opportunity to let people know about it. And I really appreciate the series you're doing and the opportunity to tell people about the Unique Label Project.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Jason, any last comments from you?
Well, first, thanks, Ivan, for coming on and sharing with us about the uniquely abled. But the main thing that I'm trying to get across with this is we need to, if we don't start talking about it at the employers, we're never going to shift it. And I shared in the first episode that before my diagnosis, I never got a job from a job interview. It was always because somebody knew what my skills were and pointed me towards it. And from that time of 21, 22 till I was 35, I had 25 plus different employers.
Wow.
And I always thought it was my skills that were lacking. So I would always go back, learn something new to improve those skills. And it wasn't until I got the diagnosis that I realized it wasn't my skills that were lacking. It was the way in which I interacted with individuals. And the second I started to learn about that and learn where it was that my skill set really set in, that's when I actually started getting longer term employments, fewer employers. Like since my diagnosis, I've only had 2 employers. That's it. Yeah, that's
Just like
a
the rest of us,
big
right?
shift in just understanding
Yes.
how autism affected the way in which I thought and approached things.
Yeah. I should stop you. Your comment made me think of one thing. One of the things employers worry about was, okay, so I hire them in, but what kind of changes do I have to make? How's that going to impact the place? First of all, the workforce, every place we've ever gone, accepts the people completely. They actually sometimes become in loco parentis, and really take care of these kids. But, and as I said, we have this video on how do you manage uniquely able individuals. But employers have said, those are really good ideas. I should do that with everybody.
Yeah, we've heard that as well too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what we heard from Microsoft in the first one from Adam Heckman, is
Exactly.
yeah,
that those changes that need to take place, there really are minor changes,
right.
and they benefit every employee.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing we have to, that probably maybe is a little different is, I think you said, Jason, at the beginning, you got to watch the idioms. Like, even make sure your machine is clean at the end of the day. Well, unless you put down specifically exactly what do you mean by clean? That means no oil, no shavings, all the tools back in the box. Once you got defined it, then you're okay. But you got to watch not being specific, and you can't things like Joe kicked the bucket, because they'll think, oh, what's he doing kicking buckets around? So you got to watch that. But in a manufacturing environment, that's not a bad habit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Well,
I can say my first manufacturing job, I was the cleanest machine operator they had.
I bet. Yep.
yeah.
Yep. And that's what we experience as well.
This was some great conversation. Again, I want to thank you, Ivan, for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason, for letting me co-host with him here today. Thanks everyone for joining and for your time. And again, this was Industry 4.0 Club on our Thursday People, Process, and Culture room. If you like having these kind of conversations as much as we do, please join our scheduled rooms. We have them every day, Monday through Thursday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Right now we're doing Monday, Wednesday one week, and Tuesday, Thursday, and the following week, and so forth. You can check our schedule on www.industry40club.com or on LinkedIn. And again, thanks, Ivan. Thanks, Jason. It's been a great conversation, and looking forward to following what's going on with Uniquely Able Project. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yep.